The heat doesn't care if you're 17 and broke. It doesn't care that your father's been dead 6 months or that the rent's due in 4 days. It just presses down on the Commerce District like a hand on your throat, turning the sidewalk into a griddle and making every breath taste like exhaust and desperation. Emily Carter had been selling bottled water on the corner of Merchant and Fifth since the life insurance money ran out, making $15 a day while her father's murderers walked free. She thought she knew how the world worked. You keep your head down, you survive, you don't make waves. Then, Frank Miller decided to collect his weekly fee, and Emily made one phone call that would teach the entire street a lesson they'd never forget. She didn't call the police. She didn't call a lawyer. She called the woman her father had made her promise to call only in emergencies. The woman whose voice could make federal agents materialize out of thin air and business owners confess their crimes on camera. When Margaret Lawson answers, you don't threaten the girl. You don't set her up. You don't even look at her wrong. Because some debts get paid in handcuffs. And some phone calls end with an entire street frozen in fear, watching black SUVs block every exit while a woman in a charcoal suit walks toward you with a smile that promises justice has finally arrived. Chapter 1. The sun over the Commerce District didn't set so much as hammer down, turning the sidewalk into a griddle, and Emily Carter's cart into an aluminum oven. She'd been standing on the corner of Merchant and Fifth for 6 hours, her water bottles sweating more than she was. The digital thermometer on the bank across the street blinked 97 degrees Fahrenheit, then switched to the time, 2:47 p.m. Emily wiped the back of her hand across her forehead. Her fingers were pruned from handling ice-cold bottles, and her shoulders ached from pulling the cart 3 miles that morning. At 17, she should have looked like the high schoolers who walked past her without making eye contact. Instead, she looked like someone's tired older sister, the kind who'd been paying bills since middle school. She checked the cash box hidden under the ice. $14.75. That was her haul after Frank Miller took his cut. Rent was due in 4 days, and she was $180 short. The electricity had already been shut off once this month. Frank appeared at 3 o'clock like clockwork, his shadow falling across her cart before his voice did. Polo shirt, khaki shorts, Ray-Bans that cost more than her entire inventory. He had the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not from standing in the sun trying to survive. Emily? He said her name like they were friends. How's business? She knew better than to tell him the truth. Fine. Good. He reached past her, his hand hovering over the cash box. Then you won't mind paying what you owe. Her stomach dropped. I paid you last week. That was last week. His smile never reached his eyes. This is a weekly arrangement, sweetheart. $50, same as everyone else on this block. Emily's hands clenched around a water bottle, the plastic crackling. $50 was 3 days of work. $50 was the difference between eating and not eating. I don't have it. Frank's smile vanished. Then I guess we have a problem. He grabbed the cash box, popping it open with practiced ease. His eyebrows rose. $14? Jesus, Emily. You're not even trying. Give it back. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Can't do that. He pocketed the bills, then tossed the empty box back at her. It clattered against the cart. Consider it a down payment. You'll owe me the rest by Friday, or you find somewhere else to sell your little bottles. Something in Emily snapped. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the 4 days until rent was due. Maybe it was 6 months of swallowing rage every time she walked past the police station where her father's murder case collected dust. Her hand slipped into her pocket, finding the worn piece of paper she'd carried like a talisman since the funeral. Her father had given it to her the night before he died. Thomas Carter, 20 years on the force, decorated detective, beloved dad, reduced to a hospital bed, and whispered warnings. If anything happens to me, he'd said, gripping her hand with what little strength he had left, and you're in real trouble. Real trouble, Em. Call this number. She'd memorized it, never called it, never needed to, until Frank Miller decided to steal from a dead man's daughter. Emily pulled out her phone, Cracked screen, battery at 18%, hanging on through sheer stubbornness like everything else in her life. Her fingers moved before her brain could stop them, dialing the number she'd sworn was only for emergencies. Frank laughed. Calling the cops? Your daddy's friends don't care about you anymore, sweetheart. You're just another... I don't have $50, Frank. Then I guess you're done selling water on my corner. He reached for her cart. That's when Emily pulled out her phone. Frank's hand froze. You really want to do that again? Yeah, Emily said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. I really do. She didn't have to dial. Margaret Lawson had called her yesterday, given her a direct line. For emergencies, she'd said, and Frank Miller coming back counts as an emergency. The phone rang once. He came back, Emily said when Margaret answered. Where? Same corner. He wants 50 now. Says he's going to call Donna Pierce about my license. Frank's face had gone pale, but he held his ground. Pride, Emily realized. Stupid, dangerous pride. Put me on speaker, Margaret said. Emily did. The woman's voice cut through the afternoon heat like winter. Frank, I thought we had an understanding. This is business, Frank said, but his voice cracked. She's operating without a license? That's illegal. So is extortion. So is working with Donna Pierce to drive vendors out so she can expand her boutique. So is the offshore account in Jacksonville. Should I keep going? The color drained from Frank's face entirely now. You have 10 seconds to walk away, Frank. After that, I make a phone call of my own to the FBI field office. They've been very interested in Commerce District protection rackets. Frank stepped back from the cart, then another step. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. 10, Margaret counted. 9. He turned and walked. This time, he didn't look back. This time, a small crowd had gathered. Other vendors, shop owners, the taco guy, the flower lady. They'd all watched Frank Miller retreat twice now from the same teenage girl. Emily lowered her phone, her hands finally shaking. Thank you. Emily, Margaret said, her voice softer now. I need you to understand something. This won't be the last time. When you make people like Frank back down, others will come. Are you ready for that? Emily looked at her cart, at the corner her father used to walk past every day on his way to the precinct, at the street she'd claimed as her own. Yes? Good. Then let's talk about getting you an actual vendor license. I know someone at City Hall. The line clicked off, and Emily stood there in the heat, watching Frank Miller disappear around the corner, while the whole street froze in the wake of one phone call. A woman answered on the second ring. Not hello, not a greeting. Just one word, sharp as a scalpel. Identification. Emily Carter. Her voice steadier than her hands. Daughter of Thomas Carter. The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. When the woman spoke again, her tone had shifted, still controlled, but with an edge that made Emily's spine straighten. Status. A man just robbed me. Corner of Merchant and 5th. He says he owns this street. Emily's eyes locked on Frank, watching his smirk start to falter as he realized this wasn't a call to 911. Describe him? Emily did. Every detail. The Ray-Bans, the golf tan, the gold watch, the way he said sweetheart, like it was an insult. Is he still there? Yes. Put him on. Emily held out the phone, her hand remarkably steady now. She wants to talk to you. Frank's laugh came out wrong this time, uncertain, a little nervous. But his ego was bigger than his survival instinct. He took the phone. Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but... Whatever the woman said made Frank's face go white. His mouth moved, forming words that wouldn't come. The swagger drained out of him like someone had pulled a plug. He dropped Emily's phone like it had burned him, then her cash box, bills scattering across the hot pavement. Wait. The voice carried from the phone at their feet, clear enough that pedestrians turned to look. Frank froze mid-retreat, one foot already stepping backward. Give her everything in your wallet. He did. Hands shaking, Frank pulled out his leather wallet and emptied it. $340 in crisp bills that he laid at Emily's feet like an offering at an altar. If I hear you've bothered her again, the voice continued, cold and absolute. If I hear you've bothered anyone on this corner, I will find you. And Frank, I know where you live. I know about the boat. I know about Jacksonville. Do you understand? Frank nodded frantically at the phone, then turned and walked, nearly ran, down Merchant Street, not looking back. Emily picked up her phone with hands that had started shaking now that it was over. Hello? Your father was a good man, Emily. The woman's voice had softened, just slightly. He asked me to look after you if anything happened. My name is Margaret Lawson. Next time someone threatens you, don't wait so long to call. Thank you. I don't know what to... You don't owe me anything. But Emily, your father left you more than a phone number. He left you protection. Remember that. The line went dead. Emily stood there in the hammering heat, staring at $340 scattered at her feet, understanding for the first time that her father had given her something more valuable than life insurance. He'd given her a name that made men like Frank Miller run. And in this city, that might be worth more than anything. Chapter 2. Closing time, Water Girl. Emily didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Frank Miller's voice carried that particular mix of boredom and menace that came from 20 years of collecting money people didn't have. She kept counting her bottles, pretending she hadn't heard him, pretending the $340 folded in her pocket didn't exist. It's not 5 yet, Frank. Yeah, but I'm here now. He stepped into her peripheral vision, thicker than before. Or maybe fear just made him look bigger. Same polo shirt stretched across his gut, same aviator sunglasses, despite the shadow of the awning. He'd come back. 2 days after the phone call, after Margaret Lawson, after everything, he'd actually come back. Emily's blood went cold. Either Frank was stupid, or he thought she'd been bluffing. Weekly fees due, he said, and there was something different in his voice now. An edge, like he'd spent 2 days working up the nerve to come back here, convincing himself that phone call had been some kind of fluke. She pulled a 20 from her pocket, not the money he'd given her, but her own earnings, and held it out. A test. Frank took it, counted it slowly with thick fingers, then shook his head. It's 50 now. Inflation. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You embarrassed me the other day, Emily. That costs extra. You said 20 last week. And I'm saying 50 today. He leaned against her cart, making it shift, bottles clinking together like a warning. Unless you want to discuss it with Donna at the precinct, I'm sure she'd love to check your vendor license. Oh wait, you don't have one, do you? Emily's fingers curled into fists. Donna Pierce, the shop owner with the city council connections who'd been trying to clear this corner for months. The one who'd told her father, 3 years ago, that his kind wasn't welcome in the Commerce District. Frank and Donna, working together, squeezing out anyone who didn't fit their vision of gentrified prosperity. Or Chapter 3. Actually, I need to talk to you about something, Emily. Donna Pierce stepped out of her boutique like she'd been waiting for her cue, heels clicking on the pavement like a timer counting down. She was holding something small and silver. A watch. Delicate and expensive. The kind that cost more than Emily's rent. I had a customer report this missing from my display case about an hour ago. Donna's voice carried across the sidewalk, loud enough for passing shoppers to stop and look. Loud enough to make sure everyone heard. Right around the time you were inside buying ice for your cart. Emily's stomach dropped. I checked the security footage. Donna held up her phone, but the screen was angled away so no one could actually see it. Just the implication, the thread of proof that didn't need to exist if people wanted to believe badly enough. You were standing right next to the jewelry counter. I was buying ice. Emily's voice shook, and she hated herself for it. I didn't touch anything. Kyle Benton emerged from his coffee shop next door, crossing his arms as he stepped into the growing circle. Big guy, former college linebacker who'd opened a hipster cafe with daddy's money. I saw her looking at the watches earlier, he said, his voice carrying that false concern that made Emily's skin crawl. Seemed real interested. He hadn't. Emily had never even been inside Donna's store before today. The ice came from the gas station 2 blocks over, same as always. Frank Miller materialized from somewhere in the crowd, and Emily understood with crystalline clarity that this wasn't random. This was coordinated. This was payback for 2 phone calls and 2 humiliations. "Might need to call this in, Donna," Frank said, pulling out his phone. "Theft's a serious charge." The crowd had phones out now, too, recording. Emily's cart was blocked on 3 sides by bodies pressing closer, curious and hungry for drama. The 4th side was Kyle Benton's bulk, arms still crossed, smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're a liar," Emily said quietly, but her voice was drowned out by the murmur of the crowd, by the click and whir of phone cameras, by Donna's theatrical sigh. "I don't want trouble, Emily. I really don't." Donna held the watch up like evidence at a trial. "But this is a $3,000 piece. I can't just let it go." $3,000. Emily's entire life could fit in $3,000. 6 months of rent, a year of electricity, food for longer than she wanted to calculate, and Donna was holding it like a weapon. "Empty your pockets, sweetheart." Donna's smile was all sympathy and steel. "Let's clear this up right now. If you didn't take it, you have nothing to worry about." Emily's hands trembled as she reached into her pockets. She knew what would happen before it happened, felt it in her bones the way you feel a storm coming. Her fingers touched something that hadn't been there this morning, something small and cold and metal. She pulled it out slowly. Another watch. Silver, delicate, expensive, identical to the one Donna was holding. The crowd gasped. Phones pressed closer. Frank Miller's smile spread across his face like poison. "Well," Donna said softly, "I guess that settles it." Emily stared at the watch in her palm, at the proof that had been planted in her pocket while she'd been distracted by Frank, by the crowd, by the careful choreography of her own destruction. They'd set her up. They'd actually set her up. "I didn't steal this," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Someone put it there. I didn't—" "Save it for the police," Kyle said, already dialing. The circle tightened. The phones kept recording. And Emily Carter, 17 years old, and $340 richer than she'd been 2 days ago, understood that Margaret Lawson's warning had been right. When you make people back down, others will come. And sometimes they come with silver watches and smiles that cut deeper than knives. Her hand slipped into her other pocket, finding her phone, finding the number that had saved her twice already. 3 times, she thought. Please let it work 3 times. Chapter 4. Emily reached into her pocket, and the crowd tensed, leaning in with their phones raised, expecting her to pull out more evidence, more stolen silver, more proof of guilt. Instead, she pulled out her phone, cracked screen, battery at 12%, held together by hope and electrical tape. It looked like something pulled from a dumpster, worthless as everything else in her life. Frank Miller laughed, the sound carrying across the circle of bodies. "What are you going to do? Call your daddy. Oh, wait." He let the sentence hang there, cruel and unfinished, because everyone on this street knew what had happened to Detective Thomas Carter. Bridge, water, accident, they'd called it. Emily's thumb hovered over a single saved contact. Just a number. No name. Margaret had told her to use it only for emergencies, but Emily figured being framed for grand theft in front of 20 witnesses with cameras qualified. "You should have let me leave," Emily said, her voice steady for the first time since Donna Pierce had stepped out of her boutique with that watch. "You should have let me leave when you had the chance." She pressed dial. The phone rang once. The crowd murmured, confused, still expecting her to call 911, to beg for help that wouldn't come. Frank's smile started to falter as he recognized the rhythm of this moment. He'd seen it before, 2 days ago, right before his world had tilted sideways. "Emily." Margaret Lawson's voice came through clear and cold. Not a question, a statement. She already knew something was wrong. "They set me up." Emily's voice didn't shake anymore. Rage had burned through the fear, leaving something harder behind. Donna Pierce, Frank Miller, Kyle Benton. They planted a watch in my pocket. There's a crowd recording. They're calling the police. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds where Donna's smile started to crack, where Kyle's arms uncrossed, where Frank took an involuntary step backward. "Put me on speaker," Margaret said. Emily did. Her hand was steady now, the phone held up like a shield. "You're on." "Donna Pierce." Margaret's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade through silk. "Owner of Bella Boutique. 3 zoning violations currently under review. 1 harassment complaint filed by the previous corner vendor. Dismissed after your lunch with Councilman Richards. Should I continue?" Donna's face went white. "Who is this?" "Kyle Benton, coffee shop owner. Student loans discharged under suspicious circumstances. Father's construction company currently bidding on the new Civic Center. Bid submitted 2 days before the RFP was publicly posted." Interesting timing. Kyle's phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the pavement. "Frank Miller. We've already had this conversation. Twice." Frank was backing away now, hands up, trying to disappear into the crowd that was suddenly pressing away from Emily instead of toward her. "You have 30 seconds to return the real watch to Emily's hand and apologize," Margaret continued. "After that, I make 3 phone calls. 1 to the FBI, 1 to the State Attorney General, 1 to Channel 7 News. They've been dying for a corruption story in the Commerce District." "This is insane," Donna said, but her voice shook. "You can't just—" 20 seconds. Donna's hand moved to her pocket. She pulled out another watch, identical to the one in Emily's palm, and held it out with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry. It was a misunderstanding. A mistake." "On camera," Margaret said. "Say it on camera." Donna turned to the crowd, to the phones still recording, to the witnesses who'd gathered for a spectacle and were getting a different show entirely. "I made a mistake. Emily didn't steal anything. I apologize." The crowd began to disperse, murmuring, disappointed that the drama had ended so abruptly. Kyle disappeared into his coffee shop. Frank was already gone, vanished like smoke. Emily stood alone with her cart, holding her phone and 2 identical silver watches, understanding for the 3rd time that her father had left her something more valuable than money. He'd left her a name that made guilty people confess. And in this city, that was worth everything. Chapter 5. The phone rang once, then twice. The line clicked. No greeting. Just a silence so complete Emily could hear the traffic lights change 2 blocks away. Could hear someone's shopping bag rustle. Could hear her own heartbeat drumming against her ribs. "Emily?" The voice was a woman's, low and controlled. It sounded like a judge reading a verdict, like the moment before a storm breaks, like the last warning you get before everything changes. They're doing it again. Emily kept her eyes on Frank Miller, watching him try to slip toward the edge of the crowd. "Corner of Merchant and 5th. They set me up." "Who?" Not angry, not surprised, just collecting data, building a case in real time. "Frank Miller, Donna Pierce, Kyle Benton. There's a crowd recording. They planted a watch in my pocket." Emily's voice was steady now, fed by rage and the strange calm that comes from knowing you're not alone anymore. "They're calling the police." A pause. In that pause, Emily swore she could hear computer keys clicking in the background, could hear Margaret Lawson pulling files, making connections, building something that would crush the 3 people who'd thought a dead detective's daughter was an easy target. "Are you safe?" Emily looked at the circle of bodies, at Donna's boutique blocking one exit, at Kyle's bulk blocking another, at Frank's hand on his phone, ready to make everything official. They blocked the exits. "Stay exactly where you are." The woman's voice didn't rise. Margaret Lawson didn't need volume to convey authority, but something in it made Emily's spine straighten, made the crowd shift nervously, made Donna's confident smile start to crack. "Don't hang up. Don't move. If anyone touches you before I get there, they'll be charged with assaulting a federal witness." Federal witness. The words hung in the air like a detonation, and Emily watched understanding bloom across 3 faces simultaneously. Frank went pale. Donna's hand flew to her mouth. Kyle took a step backward, then another, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. "Did you say—" Donna started. "You heard me." Margaret's voice carried through the phone's speaker, clear enough that the whole crowd could hear. Emily Carter is under federal protection as a material witness in an ongoing investigation into Commerce District corruption. That watch in her pocket? That's tampering with a federal witness. The crowd you assembled? That's conspiracy. The false accusation? That's obstruction of justice. The line didn't go dead. It stayed open, silent, waiting. A connection that meant Emily wasn't just some teenage girl selling water bottles anymore. She was protected. She was dangerous. She was exactly what her father had made sure she'd be if anything happened to him. Frank's phone slipped from his hand. Kyle had already disappeared into his coffee shop, the door swinging shut behind him. Donna stood frozen, the watch still in her hand, understanding that she'd just committed multiple federal crimes on camera because she'd wanted to clear a corner for her boutique expansion. The crowd was filming everything now, but the story had changed. They weren't recording a thief being caught. They were recording 3 business owners destroying their lives in real time. Emily heard sirens in the distance. Not the local police Donna had been counting on. Something else. Something federal. 5 minutes, Margaret said through the phone. Can you hold for 5 minutes? Emily looked at her cart, at the corner her father used to walk past every day, at the street that had just learned you don't threaten Thomas Carter's daughter without consequences. Yeah, she said quietly. I can hold. The line stayed open, the crowd stayed back, and Emily Carter stood in the middle of Merchant and Fifth, holding a phone like a weapon, waiting for the woman whose voice could make the entire street freeze. Chapter 6. Frank Miller's smile faltered. Who the hell was that? Emily didn't answer. She just stood there, phone pressed to her ear, staring at him with an expression that made him take a step back. It was the look her father used to get right before he closed a case, quiet certainty mixed with something that might have been pity. Donna Pierce's confidence cracked at the edges. Her hand tightened around the watch, knuckles going white. This is ridiculous. Just show us your pockets. I wouldn't, Emily said quietly. Kyle Benton moved to grab her cart, his bulk throwing shadow across her bottles. We're done playing games. The sound cut through the afternoon heat like a chainsaw through silk. Sirens, not 1 or 2. A wall of them, converging from 3 different directions, the pitch rising and falling in a symphony of consequence. The crowd turned, phones still raised, filming the corner that had suddenly become the most important intersection in the city. 3 black SUVs jumped the curb in synchronized formation, blocking Merchant Street entirely. Unmarked sedans sealed off Fifth from both directions. A van with tinted windows cut off the alley behind Donna's boutique. The traffic lights went dark, controlled remotely, trapping everyone in a grid of federal authority. And then the doors opened. Men and women in tactical vests with federal agent stenciled in white exited in formation, hands on holsters, faces blank and professional. They moved like choreography, securing the perimeter, directing the crowd back, establishing control with the efficiency of people who'd done this 100 times before. The lead SUV's driver's side door opened last, and a woman in a charcoal suit stepped out. She was 50-something, with steel gray hair pulled back tight, and eyes like a frozen lake. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She just walked directly toward Emily, with the kind of calm that made the crowd part like water, that made grown men step aside without being asked, that made the whole street understand that whatever game they'd been playing was over. Frank Miller's face went white. Kyle Benton had already started backing toward his coffee shop, but 2 agents moved to block his path. Donna Pierce stood frozen, the watch still in her hand, understanding too late that she'd just become evidence. The woman stopped 3 feet from Emily and spoke into her wrist-mounted radio, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Subject secured. Witnesses contained. Activate Operation Cornerstone. Operation Cornerstone. Emily had heard her father mention it once, years ago, late at night, when he thought she was asleep. A long-term investigation into Commerce District corruption. Business owners and city officials working together to squeeze out small vendors, to gentrify through intimidation, to build empires on the backs of people too poor to fight back. Her father had been building the case when he died. Then Margaret Lawson looked at Frank Miller and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been waiting 2 years for this moment, who'd watched Thomas Carter die before he could finish his work, who'd promised a dying man she'd protect his daughter and destroy everyone who'd killed him. Frank Miller, she said, her voice carrying across the intersection. Donna Pierce, Kyle Benton, you're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, witness tampering, and obstruction of a federal investigation. She pulled out her badge, holding it up so the crowd's cameras could capture every detail. Special Agent Margaret Lawson, FBI. And Emily? She looked at the girl with the water cart, the girl who'd been standing on this corner for 6 months, waiting for someone to care. Your father would be proud. The agents moved in, handcuffs clicking, Miranda rights being read, phones being confiscated as evidence. The crowd filmed everything. Not a thief being caught, but an empire crumbling. And Emily Carter stood in the center of it all, holding a phone that had just brought down the entire street. Conclusion. Emily stood on the corner of Merchant and Fifth as the sun finally began to sink, watching federal agents load Frank Miller, Donna Pierce, and Kyle Benton into separate vehicles. The crowd had thinned, but phones were still recording, uploading, spreading the story across the city in real time. The poor girl who made one phone call. The daughter of Detective Thomas Carter. The federal witness who brought down the Commerce District corruption ring with a cracked Nokia and a number her father had made her memorize. Margaret Lawson approached, her tactical vest removed now, just a woman in a charcoal suit who looked tired in the way people get when they've finally finished something that took too long. Your father spent 2 years building this case, she said quietly, standing beside Emily's cart. He documented everything, the extortion, the bribes, the city officials who looked the other way. He was going to testify the week after he died. Emily's throat tightened. The bridge. Wasn't an accident. Margaret's voice was flat, factual. We've known that from the beginning, but we needed more evidence, more witnesses, more time. And then you called me 2 days ago about Frank Miller, and I realized Thomas had left us the perfect bait. She looked at Emily, her frozen lake eyes softening just slightly. He left us you. You used me. Emily should have been angry, but she was too tired, too wrung out from adrenaline and fear and the strange electric feeling of watching justice actually happen. Your father asked me to protect you. I did. He also asked me to finish what he started. I'm doing that too. Margaret pulled an envelope from her jacket. There's a vendor license in here. Legal, legitimate, paid in full for the next 2 years. Your corner is yours now. No fees. No protection money. No one's going to bother you again. Emily took the envelope with shaking hands. Why? Because Thomas Carter was a good man who died trying to make this city better. Because you're his daughter, and you deserve to sell water bottles without being extorted or framed or threatened. Margaret's smile was small, genuine. And because every agent in that task force just watched a 17-year-old girl stand up to 3 criminals with nothing but a phone and her father's courage. You reminded us why we do this work. The black SUVs pulled away, sirens silent now, taking their cargo to federal holding. The unmarked sedans followed. The traffic lights flickered back to life. The street began to breathe again, but different now, cleaner somehow, like a wound that had finally been drained. What happens now? Emily asked. Now you sell water. You pay your rent. You finish high school. Margaret handed her a business card. And if anyone ever threatens you again, anyone, you call that number, day or night. I made a promise to your father, Emily. I keep my promises. She walked back to her SUV, professional and untouchable once more, and drove away. Emily stood alone with her cart as the sun painted the sky orange and gold. The taco guy gave her a thumbs up. The flower lady brought her a rose, not day-old this time, fresh and red. Other vendors she'd never spoken to nodded as they passed, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted, that one phone call had changed the rules for everyone. She pulled out her phone, looked at Margaret Lawson's number saved under emergency, and understood for the first time what her father had really left her. Not just protection, not just a weapon, but proof that the world could be fair, that bullies could lose, that a dead detective's love could reach beyond the grave and turn his daughter into someone no one would ever underestimate again. Emily Carter packed up her cart as the heat finally broke, counting the day's earnings, $23, plus the $340 Frank had given her 2 days ago. Enough for rent. Enough for electricity. Enough to survive another week in a city that had just learned a simple truth. When the poor girl makes one phone call, the entire street freezes. And when Margaret Lawson arrives, justice isn't just blind, it's inevitable. She pushed her cart toward home, leaving behind the corner that was finally, legally, rightfully hers. Behind her, the Commerce District continued its evening rush, but quieter now, more careful, because everyone had seen what happened when you threatened Thomas Carter's daughter. Everyone had watched federal agents swarm a street corner for a teenage girl with a water cart. Everyone knew the story now, and stories like that don't die. They spread, they warn, they protect. And somewhere in the fading light, Emily could almost hear her father's voice. I told you to call only in emergencies, Em, but I'm glad you did. I'm so glad you did. The phone in her pocket felt heavier now, weighted with possibility and power. She'd used it 3 times in 2 days. She hoped she'd never need it again. But if she did, when she did, the phone in her pocket felt heavier now, weighted with possibility and power. She'd used it 3 times in 2 days. She hoped she'd never need it again. But if she did, when she did, she knew exactly who would answer. Margaret Lawson always kept her promises.